not to disparage the present company, but we're going to wait just a few minutes to see whether some more people will come in, and then we'll get everything started.
Sounds good.
We'll start in just a few minutes. We'll be starting with our guests shortly. So thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. We're very pleased to be joined today virtually by Rain Paulson, Director of the Office of Emergencies and Resilience at the Food and Agriculture Organization, and Samer Abdel-Jabbar, the Director of Emergencies for the World Food Programme. And here in this room, to my left, we have with us here Lucia Elmi, the UN Children's Fund's Director of Emergency Programs. And all three will brief you on the latest integrated food security phase classification update on Sudan, which is looking at the horrendous picture of hunger in that country. We'll first start with Rain Paulson, then turn to Samer Abdel-Jabbar, and then Lucia Elmi here in this room will talk to you. So first, Mr. Paulson, can we get him up on the screen, please? Thanks. Okay. Mr. Paulson, can you hear us?
I don't know if the other connections can be muted. But...
What? Hold on. Hold on. I think we have you on screen now. Please, Mr. Paulson, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So after 14 months of escalating conflict, the food security and nutrition situation in Sudan has deteriorated significantly. The IPC analysis released in December 2023 had projected already at that stage that between October 23 and February 2024, some 37% of the population would face high levels of acute food insecurity. So what we know as IPC3 plus. And then in March of this year, 2024, the IPC at the country level, the technical working group, released a further alert based on the latest evidence, expressing major concern at that stage regarding the deteriorating food security situation and advocating for collective action to immediately prevent famine. This latest IPC analysis, which has been released today, was conducted between April and June of this year and involved more than 70 analysts from state and federal line ministries, Central Bureau of Statistics, Ministry of Agriculture, obviously also the United Nations, agencies, NGOs, technical agencies. It covered the current period and gives also projections through to September this year, with a second projection into February 2025. What then are the key findings and the headlines of this analysis? 14 months into the conflict, Sudan is facing the worst levels of acute food insecurity ever recorded by IPC in the country. Over half the population, 25.6 million people, face crisis or worse conditions, IPC 3 or above, from June to September 2024, coinciding with the lean season. And in the same period, some 755,000 people face catastrophe, IPC Phase 5, in 10 states, including the 5 states of Greater Darfur, as well as South and North Kordofan, Blue Nile, Al Jazeera State, and Khartoum states. Some 8.5 million people, approximately 18% of the population within that group, are classified as being in emergency IPC Phase 4. And there is a risk of famine in 14 areas, localities, and clusters, affecting both residents, internally displaced people, and refugees. And those 14 locations are found in Greater Darfur, Greater Kordofan, Al Jazeera states, and some hotspots in Khartoum. If the conflict escalates further, disrupts mobility, humanitarian assistance, access to markets, and livelihood activities. Just to be clear then, these latest findings mark a stark and rapid deterioration of the food security situation compared to the previous IPC update released, as I mentioned, in December 2023. The increase of the number of people in IPC Phase 3 or above is as much as 45% when compared to October, the projections from October 23 to February 2024. And the increase in the number of people in Phase 4, what we classify as emergency, has gone up by 47%, some 3.6 million people. And there, of course, very concerningly, has been then a surge in population in the most extreme situation, IPC 5 catastrophe, from 0 in the last analysis to now 775,000 people in the projected period. The key drivers, obviously pervasive conflict and insecurity, have given rise to this complex food crisis that we're facing, has hampered agricultural production, hampered access to markets, basic services, and limited livelihoods. Displaced individuals, I should say, have also largely lost livelihoods, impacting their ability to produce. Let me just say a couple of words quickly before I hand on to other colleagues in terms of FAO's response as part of the multi-agency efforts to prevent famine across the country. We're scaling up actions to support local food production of the most vulnerable households. We're concentrating efforts as FAO on supporting local production of essential cereals such as sorghum and millet, as well as providing emergency livestock assistance, including veterinary services, fishing supplies, all of which are aimed at boosting nutrition of the population then that are acutely food insecure. This current cropping season that's taking place right now in the months of June, July, and into early August is vital for Sudan. We're preparing to support some 1.8 million farming families and pastoral households in the coming months, equivalent to approximately 9 million people in total. We'll help them to restore livelihood activities and to produce food locally. We're already in the process of distributing some 8,000 tons of cereal seeds as part of the response in these areas. Our experience last year, this same time last year, in fact, shows us that when farmers can access lands and have inputs, they will produce food. This same period last year, FAO's rapid scaling up of seed distribution inputs enabled some 1 million farming households to produce enough food to feed well over 5 million people in terms of cereal requirements for the year, even in the midst of fighting and conflict. I'll just finish these early introductory comments by saying that an immediate cessation of hostilities is an essential first step to eliminating the risk of famine. And sustained and safe access, of course, has to be urgently restored to all in need of life-saving assistance. We simply can't let the people of Sudan down, and FAO, together with the other partners you see on the screen here, and others are fully engaged now in those famine prevention efforts. We have to act collectively and at scale. I'll hand with that back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Paulson. We'll now turn to Samer Abdel-Jabbar, who is the WFP Director of Emergencies, and who is also joining from on screen. If we can please pull up Mr. Abdel-Jabbar. I think I see him.
Thank you, Farhan. And to build on what Rain said on the IPC analysis, since April last year, conflict in Sudan has left millions struggling for survival and devastating violence as families are going hungry and children are at risk of malnutrition and starvation. The new hunger numbers demonstrate the desperation of the situation as the country faces the worst level of food insecurity ever recorded by the IPC in the country. More than half the population is now facing crisis level of hunger, unable to feed themselves and their families, with hunger-related deaths already being recorded. WFP is deeply concerned by these numbers and the unprecedented hunger and malnutrition that is sweeping across the country, especially as the annual lean season approaches, when food stocks run out and hunger peaks. Displacement is rampant. People are fleeing their homes with nothing and nowhere to go. The conflict is putting immense pressure on scarce resources and destabilizing the region, especially in South Sudan and Chad, where the number of refugees have doubled. Millions of people are out of reach in conflict-affected areas where they are not able to access humanitarian assistance due to fighting and insecurity. Additionally, the impending rainy season will make roads impassable, cutting off humanitarian supply routes. Thanks to the effort of our dedicated teams on the ground and partners, in 2024, so far, WFP has assisted over 3 million people, internally displaced, refugees, and vulnerable host communities across Sudan. We are working to expand our operations to reach an additional 5 million people this year. Sudan is one of our top priorities, and it is essential we keep it high on the global agenda. But with the current funding level, WFP and all the other partners don't have the resources to support everyone facing emergency or catastrophic levels of hunger. In addition to funding, we also need unfettered access to communities, safe passage and freedom of movement for humanitarian convoys. To achieve this, we call for more political and diplomatic engagement with influential stakeholders to ensure humanitarian access is granted and maintained. A ceasefire is the only way that we address the escalating hunger, displacement, and destruction. It is imperative that WFP and all humanitarian actors have the operational space to scale up assistance and tackle the long-term impacts of the conflict. WFP is working around the clock to expand access and open new humanitarian corridors to move food supplies across the country and borders. Ahead of the rainy season, we are pre-positioning food while we still can, particularly in areas of Darfur and Kordofan. In addition to our response within Sudan, we are also aiming to meet the needs of more than 2 million people who have fled the country, mostly to Chad and South Sudan, who are now going hungry in camps near the border as the humanitarian response is at breaking point. We can see the desperation of the people of Sudan growing every day. They are exhausted, they are hungry, they are traumatized. We must respond now, at scale and at speed. And to do this, we need renewed international support to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. Thank you very much. Back to you, Farhan.
Thank you, Mr. Abdel-Jabbar. And now we'll turn to Lucia Elmi, UNICEF's Director of Emergency Programs.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon. The widespread food insecurity that my colleagues from FAO and WFP have described has a particularly devastating effect on and creates specific and distinctly chilling risk for Sudan's children, boys and girls. Our projection indicates that 3.7 million children will suffer from acute malnutrition this year, with over 730,000 children facing severe acute malnutrition and an imminent risk of death without access to treatment, the highest number in a decade. It is important to understand just how dangerous severe acute malnutrition is. It is life-threatening, making children up to 11 times more likely to die than their well-nourished peers. Even when children survive malnutrition, the effects on their physical and cognitive development can be lifelong and irreversible. However, we also know how to treat those children and save their lives. And in response to the situation, UNICEF, together with partners, is intensifying its effort to prevent further deterioration. We have expanded our nutrition-focused partnership to 152 locations, ensuring an operational presence in 93 priority areas. Through the integrated nutrition intervention in more than 1,700 health facilities and 60 mobile teams, we have admitted more than 100,000 severely malnourished children this year alone. Additionally, we have established 170 new nutritional sites and distributed ready-to-use therapeutic food across the 18 states of Sudan, enough to treat 180,000 children. As of today, snapshot make clear, despite those efforts, significant challenges remain, particularly for children. The war has severely impacted the delivery of humanitarian supplies. Violence and bureaucratic hurdles impede access to conflict-affected areas, leaving countless women and children without vital nutritional support. As we face an ever-increasing risk of conflict-induced famine, the need for a comprehensive and well-funded response is critical. UNICEF, together with the other partners, including FAO and WFP, is currently facing significant funding gap. For UNICEF alone, we have a gap of $120 million to fully implement the famine prevention plan. We count on the renewed support for a significant scale-up from donors, and particularly for the pledges that are already being forward, but there have been delays in coming through. However, funding only gets us so far. It is crucial that all parties to the conflict, indeed all actors, facilitate immediate, unimpeded, and consistent humanitarian access through all possible cross-line and cross-border routes so that children and their community can receive the nutrition, water, medical care, and shelter they desperately need. It is important to note that the lack of access combined with the disruption of telecommunication networks also affect our ability to effectively monitor the situation. It is especially important that we are able to implement food security, data collection, and nutrition data in El Fasher, in Khartoum, and other hotspots that are not accessible and they are at risk of famine, along with scaling up nutrition and mortality surveys and screening in locality where most of the population in IPC5 is, and systematically record information for children under 5 so that we are able to reach them better. Most importantly, children need peace, an immediate de-escalation of the situation in El Fasher, and a nationwide ceasefire. Without peace, their chances to survival diminish, and the prospect for a brighter future remain a distant dream. It is therefore vital that we all come together as a global community to address this crisis with the urgency and the commitment it demands. The window to alert the worst is rapidly closing, and the lives of Sudan children depend on our collective action. Thank you, Farhad.
Thank you very much, Ms. Elmi. And now I'll turn the floor over for questions. As always, please indicate to whom you're directing your question. First one goes to Edie Lederer.
Thank you all very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. A question to all three of you. Do you know whether the rival generals who sparked this war have seen or will be getting copies of this report? Because they are the moving parties. And Mr. Jabber, you said that there have been a number of hunger-related deaths. Are there any numbers? And to Ms. Elmi, is there any indication of a time frame for the dire consequences for children? Thank you.
Please, you first.
Yeah, no, thank you. Let me start with the last question. Well, the time frame was yesterday, so the issue is like there's a really sense of urgency. The lean season is starting soon. It will be very difficult to be able to reach certain areas as well. And so it's not a matter of how long we have, but how much more can we have access to them. So it's really the sense of urgency and the feeling that every single day is a tragedy for the largest displacement crisis in the world and the largest also protection crisis in the world for children. So it's really a matter of urgency and every minute counts.
Mr. Paulson?
Thank you very much. Just to say, as I mentioned at the beginning of the briefing, we've published the findings online as a specialized technical agency. One of our commitments is to make sure that we have, together with our partners, the most up-to-date analysis available, shared. It's a global public good and it's online, and we hope everyone has access to that information.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, in the back?
Thank you all for your briefing. Greg Walton, AFP. This one might be best targeted to Mr. Abdul Jabbar. We saw the Special Rapporteur on the right to food describe the SAF and the RSF using access to food as a weapon of war. I wonder if you could qualify to what extent that is affecting the situation on the ground, how much of a toll that is taking, if you can give any examples of particularly egregious situations along those lines. Thank you.
Mr. Abdul Jabbar?
Thank you very much. And look, more than half of the population, Sudan is at 26 million people, are facing a crisis level of hunger and food insecurity. And 775,000 people are facing catastrophic conditions with hunger-related deaths already being recorded. That is really important for us to keep in mind. And honestly, we need to all come together as an international community, humanitarian community, to make sure that we're putting the right attention to this conflict, to make sure that we are actually able to avert further deterioration of the situation, keeping in mind and in heart and in our focus the people that are affected by this conflict. That's how we are driven by the humanitarian principle.
Mr. Jabbar, are there any indication of the numbers of hunger-related deaths?
I don't have a total number there. I think we're going to wait for the official report to be out or the snapshot to be out, and that will give you more details on the exact numbers. But by default, the methodology, if we're talking IPC level 5, that means there is already people affected by the food insecurity and famine. And also the large number of IPC level 4 means that people could, if not supported, go into that catastrophic level, which means that they will be people dead, unfortunately.
Thanks. Gabriel?
Hello, my name is Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English News Channel. Thank you very much for your briefing to all of you. Perhaps for Mr. Abdul Jabbar, the first question, but anyone that might have some information. How was the access, particularly in the Darfur region, in terms of being able to get data? We've seen in Gaza, for example, the access is limited to almost zero for these types of studies. Do you feel that your access was sufficient, or do you feel that the numbers could actually be an undercount given access limitations? And the second question is, how is the border with Chad right now in terms of aid, food aid getting in? Is any getting in through that border crossings or not? And final, for anyone that wants to answer, aside from the facts that you laid out in your presentations, each of you, what did you feel or what did you think when you saw this data for the first time come in?
Please. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, no, thank you. To answer your last question, is a feeling of catastrophic situation of children that we have not seen in over a decade in Sudan, and how this has been unfolding the eyes of the world, and how little attention the crisis in Sudan has had. And we had more traction over the past few weeks. We had our executive director who is just visited Sudan, and is really a call for action and a call for ceasefire for all children. Children don't start war, and children don't have the power to end wars, but children are the ones who suffer first and the most. So it's really a wake-up call for everyone to act as soon as possible and to get a ceasefire.
And I think for the first question, we turn to Mr. Abdel Jabbar.
Thank you very much. I think on access, it's not just about having one access or a number of trucks across line or cross border. It's to make sure that actually the restoration of safe and unhindered humanitarian access, we need to make sure that it's sustainable. We need to make sure that it's making an impact. We have been collectively able to get some aid across the cross lines and cross border, but I think we need to make sure that it's sustainable, and that is really important. We are able to see some commercial sector actually able to move some commodities, and that's why all the humanitarian partners, including WFP, are actually also using cash-based operations to actually make sure that we stimulate those markets where it's functioning. But of course, from our side, we're also using in-kind assistance to help us navigate some of those access challenges and do, if you can say, access negotiations. In terms of borders, I think it's pretty different than the comparison with Gaza, in the sense that we're talking about the number of countries. Access from Chad is one, South Sudan from Egypt, and we have an open port in Port Sudan. So we're looking at the utilization of all those different corridors, but also from other countries that could move in. So we've been trying convoys out of Libya into Chad and into Darfur's. That has successfully worked, but not yet to the level. It was a testing attempt that we wanted to see if it's going to be working. This was done 20 years ago as well, and it allowed the scale in response.
And maybe if I could come in as well on one of these, thank you very much. If I could come in as well on this question around the reactions when we see this data coming in. I think the strongest reaction that I know also my colleagues, Samir and Lucia, are feeling is, we know what it takes to prevent famine. We have multi-sectoral strategies, nuanced by geographical location, mixes of activities between in-kind assistance and agricultural support and health interventions and nutrition interventions and water and sanitation interventions, planned in detail. We know how to respond. The challenges that we're all having from a funding perspective, from an attention perspective, and some of the access challenges as well are preventing us. And so when you see numbers come in that describe a situation this bad, when we were already talking about a situation that was really concerning with the analysis that was done in December last year, it's this sense of, we need more attention and we need more support, because we do know how to respond to these contexts with the right resourcing.
Thank you. I have one question that was asked by a reporter, Evelyn Leopold, via text, and she asks, are there cartels operating in the conflict areas that keep food prices high? Does any of you want to handle that one?
I'm happy to just cover this. I think what's really important is to make sure that the affected population are able to receive the aid. And usually when crisis happens, the scarcity of commodities in the market could lead into some issues that could affect the stability and stabilization of the markets. Exactly one of the issues, like you said. And for us, that's why it's important to make sure that we are getting in aid, but also at the same time enabling the commercial sector where possible to be restored, so that actually it can push the markets to stabilize and to make sure that there is goods that people could buy, or also humanitarian assistance that those that are mostly in need for it get it for free.
Thank you. Okay, I see no other questions. So with that, I'd like once more to thank our guests, Rain Paulson, the Director of FAO's Office of Emergencies and Resilience, Samer Abdel-Jaber, WFP's Director of Emergencies, and Lucia Elmi, UNICEF's Director of Emergency Programs. So thank you all very much for your briefing. And for you in this room, please stick around. Stefan Dujarric will be here with the noon briefing in just a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Integrity. I was in a podcast. You were in a podcast? In the podcast today. Excellent. Yes. Excellent. But why are you wearing corduroy when it's literally 90,000 degrees outside? Because in here it's okay, and I'm not wearing it outside. All right. I'm just, I worry about your I just. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Madame, Okay, all right. Oh, my pin is, it was from the memorial, the UN Memorial for Fallen Staff. There you go. All right, good afternoon. Tomorrow, Friday, we will have a briefing here at 11:30 to launch the Sustainable Development Goals Report 2024. It will be presented by the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Lee Jun-ha, along with Stefan Schweinfest and Yong-Hee Min from the Statistics Division of DESA. They will be here. The Secretary General will come to deliver some remarks at the opening, but he will not stay to take questions. And I can tell you that according to the report, current progress, no surprise, unfortunately, is falling far short of what is required to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And the remaining 6 years will be critical to the acceleration process. On Bolivia, you will have seen that yesterday evening we issued a statement based on the events in the country at the time. I just want to add that the Secretary General welcomes the peaceful resolution of the situation in Bolivia. Our Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is in Geneva today to mark the 60th anniversary of the International Trade Center. In her remarks, she underscored the importance of putting people first in trade and sustainable development to drive positive change. She also met with senior UN officials. On her last day in Dalian in China yesterday, she attended and participated in the Financing New Growth Pathways session, where she highlighted the promising initiatives for increased investments for global sustainable growth, and she called for the private sector to align their investments and strategies and the ambition of the Sustainable Development Goals. She will return to New York this evening, just in time to celebrate her birthday, because it is Amina Mohammed's birthday today. Turning to Gaza in the occupied Palestinian territory, I can tell you that our colleagues in the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warn that access constraints continue to hamper aid operations, including efforts to scale up nutrition support. Our partners report that limited access in the north is preventing the establishment of new nutrition services center in that area. Meanwhile, in central Gaza, difficulties continue finding adequate space to set up nutrition sites in Deir el-Bala and Khan Yunis areas. However, our humanitarian partners are continuing their efforts to expand their presence in those areas, as well as in the Al-Mawasi and in Gaza City. The World Food Programme says its operations are being severely hindered by escalation of fighting in southern and central Gaza, as well as the limited flow of humanitarian assistance and the lack of public order and safety in the south. Despite these challenges, the World Food Programme has managed to reach 766,000 people in Gaza with food this month alone, though these rations have been reduced due to limited aid and dwindling food stocks. So far in June, WFP has also provided 9.4 million hot meals through a network of more than 90 community kitchens, and they were able to reach about 300,000 people through that. The vast majority of these meals were distributed in Deir el-Bala and Khan Yunis. However, humanitarian partners say a shortage of cooking gas, combined with the absence of public power supply, is hindering efforts to help to keep these community kitchens and bakeries running. UN Relief and Works Agency UNRWA says people in Gaza are living surrounded by piles of waste and sewage. Health conditions continue to worsen due to crowded shelters, lack of food, water, and fuel, minimal access to medical supplies, and the summer heat that is hitting Gaza. Our partners tell us that efforts to collect and transfer solid waste to temporary sites are continuing this month, but at a lower rate due to the lack of fuel. Fuel shortages could also hinder ongoing maintenance work on the electricity feeder line for the southern Gaza seawater desalination plant. Meanwhile, our partners working to provide shelter for displaced people in Gaza report that repeated waves of displacements are wearing out makeshift shelters, which are having to be disassembled and reassembled again. This morning, back here in the Security Council, there was a briefing on the Central African Republic UN peacekeeping mission. The members were briefed by the Secretary General Special Representative, Valentine Rugwabiza. She said the current political and security crises in the CAR have negatively impacted cattle owners, turning their practice into one of the main triggers of attacks against civilians. She said the last month the UN mission in the country facilitated the first high-level conference to support livestock owners, which resulted in various new measures to protect them. She also said the mission is supporting preparations for the upcoming election. She did express her concern at the continuous misinformation and disinformation campaign against the UN mission, and said this is further complicating the already challenging context, to say the least, in which the mission operates. And in South Sudan, our humanitarian colleagues are warning that the number of people facing catastrophic conditions are the highest level on the integrated food security phase, the phase 5 for their classification, in parts of Jonglei state in South Sudan is projected to almost double next month, rising to 79,000 people compared to 35,000 people at the same period last year. Overall, more than 7 million men, women, and children in the country face food insecurity. That's more than 20% compared to 2023 mid-year numbers. South Sudan is also preparing for the worst floods in 60 years. To respond to this, the humanitarian community aims to provide life-saving assistance to some 2.4 million people of the 3.3 million projected to be impacted by flooding in northern and northeastern and central parts of the country starting as early as September. And on the political front, the Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General in South Sudan, Mr. Song, spoke today at a meeting of the reconstituted Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission for South Sudan. He welcomed progress on development and electoral security plan, which is essential to South Sudanese to vote safely. And some positive news coming out of West Africa. The extraordinary session of the Cameroon-Nigeria Mixed Commission reached a milestone today towards the peaceful completion of border demarcation. This took place during the 6th extraordinary session held in Yaoundé on the 26th and 27th of June. The Mixed Commission will adopt a roadmap aiming at achieving the demarcation process by the end of 2025. The Special Representative of the Secretary General for West Africa and the Sahel and the Chairman of the Cameroon-Nigeria Mixed Commission, Mr. Santos Shimao, chaired these deliberations in the presence of the heads of delegations of both countries. As you'll recall, the Commission was established in 2002 by then Secretary General Kofi Annan at the request of the leaders of Cameroon and Nigeria at the time regarding the border dispute triggered by claims of sovereignty along the Bakassi Peninsula. An example that diplomacy takes time, but this is part of the peaceful resolution of conflict. And it is good news. We issued a statement yesterday on the judgment issued by the International Criminal Court against Al-Hassan Ag Abdul Aziz Ag Mohammed Ag Mahmoud, in which the trial chamber found him guilty of crimes against humanity and war crimes against civilian population in Timbuktu in Mali. This is another significant milestone in accountability and a step forward in efforts to bring justice to the victims of crimes and reaffirms that impunity will not be tolerated. The Secretary General's thoughts are with the victims of these crimes against humanity and war crimes in Timbuktu, for which Mr. Hassan has been found guilty. And moving on to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that an interagency humanitarian convoy delivered aid today to frontline communities in Donetsk region, east of the country. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that nearly 4,000 remaining people in the communities of Kurokov, Marinka, and Vulvodar are struggling to access basic services because of the ongoing fighting. Today's convoy delivered 16 tons of medical and hygiene supply, jerry cans, materials to repair damaged houses that will be distributed by some of our national partners. This is the 20th such convoy this year to frontline areas and the 6th in the Donetsk region. Our humanitarian colleagues say that on June 26th, the Donetsk region, as well as the frontline Kherson and Kharkiv regions in the south and east of Ukraine, sustained new civilian casualties, including children, as well as damages to civilian infrastructure caused by ongoing hostilities. That's according to what authorities are telling us. And moving back to this hemisphere in Haiti, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that between 22nd and 26th of June, WFP distributed more than 59,000 meals to nearly 12,000 displaced people in the greater Port-au-Prince metropolitan area. WFP has also distributed $1 million worth of cash-based transfer to over 43,000 displaced people in the capital who'd previously been receiving meals. Meanwhile, the UNFPA, our population fund, sounded the alarm on the risks of women and girls that are grappling with amid the ongoing humanitarian crisis, with armed groups using sexual violence as a tactic to instill fear and seize control of entire neighborhoods. UNFPA said that although reports of rape and sexual violence are soaring, there are vast underrepresentation of the true scale of these horrific crimes. UNFPA continues to provide medicine and supplies, including for the clinical management of rape survivors, and to 12 health facilities in the capital and surrounding region. Mobile clinics are also operating at 8 displacement sites to support reproductive health, as well as hotlines for survivors of sexual assault and the provision of safe spaces. An artistic note, our very artistic colleagues at the UN offices in Vienna have collaborated with the Calle Libre, a street art festival for urban aesthetics, to create a mural at the Vienna International Center. The painting by the Australian artist Fintan McGee, not good at pronouncing Australian names. I've had problems before. I'm going to get in trouble. The painting explores the human element of the United Nations and the fragility of peace, a concept in support of the SDGs and the Summit of the Future. It symbolizes 17 of the SDGs and particularly dedicated to Goal 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. If you are in Vienna, go see it. It's being finished today. Speaking of today, it is the day of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises today. We are 6 years away from the 2030 deadlines to achieving the SDGs, and progress is lagging, as we've been telling you, as many countries face challenges and interconnecting challenges. The day offers an opportunity to discuss and exchange ideas on how key stakeholders, including policymakers, large companies, financial institutions, and the international community can support micro, small, and medium-sized businesses to advance the SDGs. Lastly, we have a quiz, which is good news and means we got money in the bank. This country was visited by the Secretary General on June 10th through 12th of this year for a conference on Gaza. Yes, Urdun, thank you. We thank our friends. What? I don't have a question. Okay, that's okay. You can still win. We thank our friends in Amman. We are grateful to them for paying their dues and taking out of a long drought and no-hitting streak. We're up to 116 fully paid member states. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. Several humanitarian organizations and some UN agencies have been complaining, obviously, about the lack of fuel to run hospitals and electricity and other things. Can we get an update on fuel deliveries and what is coming in and what is needed?
To put it bluntly, very little is coming in and a lot is needed. We have been underscoring here the fact that generators are running low. I think the Kuwaiti Field Hospital had to shut down its generator earlier this week. As always, when the fuel supplies are low, it's a matter of just stretching out what there is. So generators have to be cut for a number of hours. That impacts hospitals. It impacts desalination plants. So we keep trying to get more fuel in, but we're not getting enough, and I will try to get you some hard numbers.
Thank you. And on the road from Kerem Shalom to the coast, is the UN able to use it at all, or is the situation still the same?
Not at this point. I know our humanitarian colleagues are in contact with the Israelis, and we're in contact with the Israeli military more than a daily basis to try to figure out how we can access that road safely and make sure that the road is safe both for the trucks, but also passable in terms of repairing whatever damage there is to the road.
And is there any update on the U.S. peer review?
Nothing to share with you at this point, I'm sorry to say. Deji and then Gabriel.
Yeah, follow up on the floating dock. It's been reported that only 1,000 tons of humanitarian aids delivered out of 7,000 tons from that, which went to Gaza from that floating dock. I'm just wondering, for the rest of the 6,000 tons of aid, who is protecting those? Do you know that?
Well, the aid is offloaded from the U.S. pier. We're not involved in that offloading. We're involved in picking it up. I think that's a question that you would have to ask the U.S.
Because the U.S. said there are no boats on the ground on the Gaza Strip.
That's correct.
So, which
I
means
can't speak to the security of goods that we are not in control of.
Okay. So next question. Tonight there is a debate. There is a U.S. presidential debate. Will the Secretary General watch that debate? And what is the most important topic for him to watch? Or maybe you will watch it for him?
The most important thing is to ensure that we do not add to all the commentary that is being made around this debate. Gabriel.
Thank you, Steph. We're hearing that there was a convoy of critically injured. Let me rephrase that. We're hearing that there's a convoy of people that need life-saving medical attention that was able to possibly leave Gaza today. Was the WHO, to your knowledge, involved in that?
The knowledge that I have is zero on this. I hadn't heard, but I will check with our WHO colleagues if we were involved. I mean, sometimes we're involved, sometimes we're not.
Sure.
But we'll check with
Thank you. And the Gaza Health Ministry says there are about 25,000 people that need medical attention, cancer patients and others, that have not been able to be evacuated yet. Generally, what's the Secretary General's position in terms of the UN's role in trying to get assurances that they can get out and get help?
We've been, as you know, WHO and others have been involved in sort of harrowing missions, right, to get different people out, including babies out. So we again, it's like everything else that's going on in Gaza. We are, as soon as we find a breach, we try to get in, right? We try to move the process forward and deliver humanitarian aid. But it is on a case-by-case basis, assessment by assessment basis. It is clear to anyone who is paying a minimum of attention to this crisis that there are, in a war zone where people cannot escape, you can very well imagine that there are a huge number of people who need medical help, whether it's through chronic disease and where they needed dialysis, or whether it's from wounds sustained, from amputation. There are a lot of people who need help. Very few have been fortunate enough to be evacuated compared to what is likely a very big number. But the Rafah crossing remains closed for intents and purposes. So it's a very challenging situation. Margaret Bashir, and then Madame, sorry.
Thanks, Steph. I'm sorry, I was a few minutes late, so if you mentioned it at the top, I apologize. Any update on the UN staff who've been detained in Yemen?
No, nothing. Nothing to share. To share with you. Has
the UN had any access to them? Have you visited them?
I'm not aware that we've been able to have physical access to them, and obviously their condition remains of deep concern to us.
Would you, in this sort of situation, ask the ICRC to visit?
I think anyone who can help, we would love to help, but I'm not. I will check. I'm not. My understanding is that we've not had any access. Gabriel, to your answer, I'm told that WHO, with the support of our colleagues at OCHA, today did evacuate nearly 24 patients to receive care outside of Gaza. This was the first medical evacuation of critically ill patients in Gaza since the 7th of May.
Thank you.
Madame.
Thank you, Steph. Within the last 72 hours, you've probably also seen that a Palestinian was shot, beaten, and tied to an Israeli army jeep in the West Bank. An Israeli military dog attacked an elderly woman inside her home in Gaza. And today we saw in the news that a little baby whose house was bombed died a very painful death due to his burns, and he was not able to leave Gaza or get the necessary medical care. So these are just some of the incidents. And while we mostly talk about the bombardment, it seems that the violations of international humanitarian law are also continuing against Palestinian civilians. So are you following these incidents, and
yes,
what is your reaction?
We are, and we're horrified at every violation. I think the video of the man, the Palestinian man strapped on top of the military jeep was truly horrific. And there needs to be accountability for that behavior. And I think that the other case of the baby is just one example of tragically many people, young, old, any age, who continue to suffer and who continue to die in this conflict until we find the parties agree to halt this conflict. Edie.
Is it possible to get an update on the possible dates of deployment of the other countries that have pledged police to the Haiti operation? The UN has been following
this is the first one in 2 months. What do you? How would you characterize how the Secretary General makes
I think
that?
we're running out of words to describe this horrific situation where people continue to suffer, people continue to die, and you know we follow things like you do. We know there is President Biden put forward a plan, pretty simple plan, and it is we really would like to see the parties agree to that plan so we can move on with the humanitarian operation, so the hostages can be released and some relief can arrive. Margaret.
Sorry, one more again. Hopefully you didn't get it already. Yesterday, Malala Yousafzai said she spoke with the Secretary General about the Doha conference and expressed her extreme disappointment about the lack of women's representation. Do you have a readout from the Secretary General's end?
Secretary General, I think, was very keen to speak to Malala, who is also, as you know, UN Messenger of Peace. I think to lay out very clearly what this meeting is, what this meeting isn't. It is not. It is not a meeting about moving forward with recognition or legitimization of the rule of the de facto authorities. Laying out to her what Rosemary DiCarlo and others have very clearly explained, that women's groups, human rights groups will be meeting with all the Afghan envoys. This is not it is not meant to be an intra-Afghan dialogue. The Secretary General has an immense respect for Malala Yousafzai, what she's done, what she represents, and the importance of her voice in support of women's rights and frankly, human rights for all. Thank you. On that note, happy lunch. See you tomorrow.